For the first time in what feels like a very long time, the Wall Street Journal is covering Bitcoin in a non-FUD-oriented article. It's talking about how the digital currency is up 90% this year. We'll take a look at that, as well as Bitcoin's performance in 2020, up over 90%. In fact, far outpacing gold, far outpacing the stock market and the S&P 500. Not only in this last year, however, but when you take Bitcoin risk-adjusted returns versus gold versus other traditional stocks, this holds true in terms of the outperformance in the last year, in the last 5 years, and the last 10 years as well. In fact, we're seeing a lot of positive press attention lately suggesting that really Bitcoin is the most successful investment of all time. If you invested $1 at the very first market price, you would now have over $18 million. So I guess the next challenge right now is Bitcoin and the US election, whether we see a Biden or a Trump presidency. Some are arguing that either way, it looks pretty good for Bitcoin, whether it's uncertainty or whether it's market enthusiasm. The markets are going to respond well because Bitcoin is becoming more and more of an independent asset. And after that, we'll be taking a look at the opportunity that exists right now for Ethereum with the classic capitulation chart, which you've likely seen by now, the cycles of the market. Many are saying, at least when you compare it to Bitcoin, Ethereum is due for quite a run recently. It's been as high as about a fifth of the value of Bitcoin. In fact, a little bit more than that. We're now sitting at just over a 20th of the value. So it should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 times its current value when you take a look at it as a percentage of Ethereum. Of course, I'm rounding my numbers there, but you get the point. It's undervalued right now, according to many. We'll take a look at what it means in terms of Bitcoin and its relationship with altcoins. There's a dominance right now that is rising, but a decoupling is also taking effect not only against traditional stocks, but against altcoins at the moment. After that, we have Plutus, which is in the news. Crypto.com is in the news. Input Output HK is in the news, which means Cardano is as well. We'll take a look at Polkadot updates as well. And then finally, we'll end on this Keep3r network, which you may have heard about, has just had a meteoric rise since its launch in these last couple of weeks, not even couple of weeks, couple of days actually. These last few days happens to be down today, but as you can see, it's had really just a stratospheric start. So we'll briefly run down and let you know what that is all about. Guys, if you like this kind of content, Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrency, be sure to like and subscribe. Michael Saylor here in the news. He is, of course, the CEO of MicroStrategy, and he's calling attention to some favorable, publications when it comes to Bitcoin out of the Wall Street Journal. So he's suggesting that they're beginning to notice Bitcoin and explore its relationship to the wider capital markets, where US stocks alone are worth nearly $52 trillion. Here's that publication by the journal. Bitcoin is back trading near 3-year highs. The digital currency is up 90% this year, outpacing stocks, gold, and other assets. We are covering the story here on Altcoin Buzz.io. Bitcoin price is up 90% this year with this article by Deepika. And what's interesting is that if you compare it to traditional assets, I love the cosmic Bitcoin bull here, by the way, fantastic image. As I was saying, if you compare it to other assets, traditionally you would think of some of the other safe havens as at least being comparable, such as gold, such as precious metals, but Bitcoin really has outperformed all but only certain tech stocks in 2020. I'm thinking of PayPal, for example, and there may be a couple of others, but it's really in a class of its own when it comes to investment returns in the last 12 months or so. And if you were lucky enough to invest in the lows of March 13th and 14th, then your return is even higher in 2020. But we feel what's important here is that mainstream media, as Deepika writes, is starting to notice and pay attention to some of these Bitcoin returns. And that means that new entrants will swarm into the space for quick profits. So effectively, this will drive up the price even faster. It's kind of like a virtuous cycle at this point. And if you take a look at some of the numbers here, Econometrics suggest that Bitcoin's performance really is quantitatively superior to most other asset classes. Again, up over 90%, in fact, 98.5% at the time of this tweet, at least on the 2nd of November. That's compared to up 23% for gold and just a total anemic 0.6% for the S&P 500. I realize it's been, a tumultuous year. There's been a lot of volatility across all markets, but Bitcoin has arguably withstood that same volatility and has come out on top. But actually, the plot thickens, because if you take a look at Plan B's publication here, their tweet from the 1st of November, the argument is that Bitcoin is the best performing asset not only this year, but in the last 5 years and the last 10 years as well. And that's even risk-adjusted Bitcoin. It still outperforms all other assets year after year. The only real trouble that you run into is if you take a look at the last, maybe 2 years, if you compare against 2017, 2018, some of those highs, those are really really the only scenario where a Bitcoin investment comes out behind. But the question is asked here, what's your reason for not having Bitcoin in your investment portfolio? This is the graph that we just saw. Again, Bitcoin up now above 60%, closer to 90 or 100% in terms of year-to-date performance and returns. Gold about 30%, and the traditional indices closer to single-digit percentages. The same is true in the last 5 years, and the same is also true in the last 10 years. Again, most importantly, these are numbers that are risk-adjusted. So you're looking at Bitcoin risk-adjusted returns versus other assets. It still comes out head and shoulders above other assets. And Deepika points out that we feel that we're at the beginning of an institutional bull run here, because in the last couple of months, we've seen all kinds of companies like Square, like MicroStrategy, and now like PayPal, which have added Bitcoin support or are using it kind of as a hedge, most likely against inflation. I think that continues to be really the number one concern for a lot of these treasuries, a lot of these publicly traded companies, or maybe even some that are private but have to answer to shareholders in one form or another. Look, a good strategy is a good strategy, whether you're publicly traded or a private company. But I think inflation is a major concern for those at the helm, those that are leading financially some of these companies. Now, here's an interesting observation, and don't kick yourself if you didn't invest in Bitcoin originally, because basically none of us did. So don't beat yourself up too hard, but just an interesting thought experiment here at Woonomic. And just for kicks, $1, just $1 invested in Bitcoin at the first market price now equals over $18 million today, over $18 million. If you take that first dollar and you invest it in 2010 into gold, that dollar in gold would now be worth $1.81. So I'm sorry, Peter Schiff, but your promises of unlimited prosperity haven't exactly paid off. And again, the argument is always made about Bitcoin being the new digital gold. People are using it as a hedge against economic instability as well as inflation. But that is a crazy, crazy figure. $1 transformed into $18 million. Can you imagine? Hindsight is always 2020. And despite all of the positive sentiment, despite all of the positive price performance we've been seeing lately for Bitcoin, many people are saying the test ultimately boils down to what is happening this week. Of course, the US presidential election between President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden. This is something that I guess for a lot of different political reasons that, we're not quite going to get into, but it's going to be very heated. It's already been a pretty brutal and a pretty venomous election cycle, unfortunately, and a campaigning cycle. And now there's this kind of looming threat that regardless of who looks like they're going to win or who may win, there are all kinds of arguments to be made, I think, both ways about how you could contest the official results. A lot of people seem to be nervous about that, and it's always kind of anticipated now as being a default that one way or another the results of the election are going to be contested. And so this is what many people are calling the ultimate test for Bitcoin, really for a couple of different reasons. And there are a couple of different scenarios here that we'll break down. So first of all, as this Forbes author writes, last week the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed its worst week and month since the coronavirus crash in March, as the Republicans and Democrats geared up for the presidential race's final lap. And this is where we've kind of been seeing this famous decoupling phenomenon, because in that context of the markets really tanking and doing very poorly, Bitcoin broke its long-held peg to those equity markets, and Bitcoin added 5% over the last 7 days. It's down a little bit right now at the time of this recording, but the observation is what is important. As the markets retraced and went down, the traditional markets, Bitcoin went up. It went in the opposite direction. So if this were to continue, then Bitcoin is really fulfilling, I suppose, part of the functionality that we would all hope for as being a hedge against market volatility, against traditional financial crashes and mini crashes. And as the author continues here, quote, "A Trump win will probably be welcomed by the stock market players, and Bitcoin will keep on growing along with other assets." So in other words, if Trump wins, that's good for Bitcoin because the positive sentiment will still carry over into the crypto and Bitcoin space. Even if there is that decoupling, positive sentiment is positive sentiment. This is according to one analyst's opinion. However, take a look at the inverse situation here. It's actually also favorable for Bitcoin. A Biden win, which may lead to a stock market fall, could also work in Bitcoin's favor based on the expectation of the depreciation of the dollar. Whether you are for or against Vice President Biden and his campaign right now, There is the suggestion that taxes are going to be increased, maybe spending is going to increase, quantitative easing is going to increase, and therefore inflation will follow. Again, whether you're for or against, that is part of the campaign at this point, at least increased taxation. And I think a little bit more deficit spending may also kick in as well. So what many seem to be saying is that Bitcoin is going to win either way, because whether the markets rally and there's positive sentiment, Bitcoin will do well. But even if that's not the case, even if the markets retrace and there's a lack of enthusiasm, there's a lack of confidence in fiscal policy, in monetary, in the financial markets, that's still good for Bitcoin if you view Bitcoin ultimately as a hedge against those kinds of circumstances. Markets loathe uncertainty. So in the event of a contested result, safe haven assets will get a boost, especially non-sovereign classes such as gold and Bitcoin, said Nigel Green, who is the chief executive of DeVere Group. Business Insider is suggesting a similar point of view. Bitcoin doesn't care who wins the US election. It will rise in value regardless of the outcome, a cryptocurrency fund chief says. I'd be curious to know your thoughts about this, guys. I think, look, ultimately Bitcoin's going to keep rising and rising and rising. And so from a certain perspective, depending on your time frame, it doesn't really matter. But from a more, I guess, micro or myopic point of view, I do think it'll react positively to just the political turbulence alone. I think that's always been sort of a boon for Bitcoin and something that works in our favor in this space. But I'd like to know in the comments below, ultimately, let's say we settle in a few weeks from now, we have a clear and definitive winner. Who do you think is going to be better for Bitcoin in the world of blockchain and cryptocurrency? Forget about regulations, but I'm just curious to know, who do you think is going to affect positive market sentiment? Who's going to make sure that Bitcoin's price rises in response to their presidency? Do you think that'll be Donald Trump, or do you think it'll be Joe Biden? I'm kind of two minds about this, and maybe I can discuss it more tomorrow, but I'm first curious to hear your thoughts on the matter. So please let us know in the comments below. Switching gears now just a little bit, and this is only an observation. It is not financial advice, but there does seem to be an interesting pattern, or an observation, I guess is the only way I can describe it, when it comes to Ethereum's value as a fraction or a percentage of Bitcoin. Take a look here at the Ethereum over Bitcoin price. So again, right now, Ethereum is worth 0.1 Ethereum, I should say, is worth about 0.028 Bitcoin. In other words, a tiny fraction. It's not even worth a tenth of a Bitcoin. It's worth about a little over 25%, so a little over a quarter of a tenth. So about 40, rough, quick math there, 40 Ethereum go into every Bitcoin. And you can see the shape of the market cycle here. You guys are very familiar, I'm sure, with this capitulation cycle, the hope and euphoria followed by complacency and panic and anger and depression and disbelief cycle. This is the psychology of a market cycle. It's been trotted out by many a YouTuber. But what's interesting here is that if you kind of draw the comparison, well, again, take a quick look and just burn this into your brain before I switch screens here. Isn't it interesting, the shape of the Ethereum curve right now? And of course, we're zoomed in right now, but if you zoom out a little bit, well, doesn't it look odd to see just how high Ethereum has climbed, not in terms of total all-time high value, but again, as a fraction of Bitcoin, it did hit actually over a fifth. So you had back in 2016, about 5 Ethereum per Bitcoin. More recently, in the all-time, not even the all-time highs. Let's kind of make it reasonable here. Let's take a look at February of 2018. You had Ethereum valued at a little more than a tenth of the value of Bitcoin. Again, 0.11, just doing some quick math here. As you can see, we're currently sitting at 0.0285 Ethereum per Bitcoin. There is the argument that, forget about all-time highs, forget about dollar value, but in terms of its value in relation to Bitcoin, it seems to me that Ethereum, and it seems to many, by the way, this isn't just my opinion, it seems that Ethereum is due for a rise in relative value versus Bitcoin. And right now, make no mistake, we are exiting the altcoin cycle and we are coming into a Bitcoin cycle. It's quite evident. You can see that just by the Bitcoin dominance alone. I haven't discussed that really in a couple of days, but the Bitcoin dominance has risen steadily but surely. Right now, we're at 62.3% Bitcoin dominance. If you're not familiar with this figure, I quote it all the time, but it just means it's the percentage of this total cryptocurrency market cap that is dominated by Bitcoin's market cap. So in other words, this $247 billion figure here, that's the market cap for Bitcoin, represents 62.3% of this total market cap figure here, 369.997 billion, nearly 397. So going back to altcoinbuzz.io, this write-up by Jeffrey Francis, if you'd like to learn more about Bitcoin dominance and how it relates to altcoins, if you're perhaps a little bit newer to the space, or even if you're not, look, it's always good to brush up on these kind of quantitative details and whatnot. But basically this signals whether or not we're in a Bitcoin cycle versus an altcoin cycle. As I mentioned recently, with rising Bitcoin dominance, we're kind of exiting the altcoin cycle at the moment. So look, never financial advice, but this may be a good time to pick up some of your favorite projects in the altcoin space on the cheap. Jeffrey here summarizes that Bitcoin dominance is an extremely important parameter for both traders and investors. As I said, it marks either the beginning or the end of an altcoin cycle or season. And if ever you're looking for a quick cheat sheet as far as how Bitcoin dominance affects Bitcoin and altcoin prices, take a look at this, download it, make a quick PDF or JPEG file, and keep that handy because it is a good reference indeed. All right, speaking of our namesake altcoins, let's discuss some updates here in the space, beginning with Plutus at Plutus on Twitter. Make sure you're following. PLU is now listed on BitMax. Hey, kudos. Wall Street team with $400 million daily exchange volume. This listing also includes a 25,000 USDT competition, staking of PLU with 22% rewards, and 6-month free premium account. Our $8 price floor guarantee also remains until January. So this is really great news for the PLU team. Congratulations and kudos to their listing on BitMax. This article is from the 30th of October. They also announced 5 other exchange partnerships. So we recently revealed our plans to list Pluton on several exchanges, as well as a series of micro sales in order to boost liquidity of the token. This is a program coined the Pluton Liquidity Injection Program, or PLIP, which we've discussed before, which will help increase the trading volume of PLU across both our internal Plutus DEX and external markets. So again, BitMax was the first of 5 exchanges that are to be revealed. Here's kind of, I guess, the breadcrumb trail or the hints that they provided. So BitMax was announced on the 30th of October. A Tier 3 exchange is going to be announced later in the week on the 6th of November. A Tier 3 exchange is also going to be announced at some point, we're not quite sure, at the end of the month on the 26th of November, a Tier 1 exchange, and another Tier 1 exchange is promised at some point in December. So a lot to look forward to if you're a fan of Plutus and PLU and the PLIP program, of course. This is very exciting news. So 5 exchanges, 2 of which are Tier 1. It seems like they're saving the best for last. And here we have Crypto.com, also in the news at Crypto.com on Twitter. Here are their October updates now that we're in November. So 5 million users was a milestone that was celebrated. DOT supercharger on the app, cross-site, testnet, pay ID integration, pay for recurring buy in all kinds of different stable coins there. As you can see, localization for app and exchange. You guys can read more about those updates on blog.crypto.com. I know some of you guys were upset when the Crypto.com team changed up their earn and their APY rates, that kind of stuff. But look, if you're still into the project, as of course we are over at Altcoin Buzz, you will notice that the price has retraced quite a bit. If this is something in the long term that you still think is a good idea and a viable ecosystem, again, not financial advice because it never is, but now may be a good time to get back into CRO. You can avail yourself of all the benefits now pretty much at a discounted price, especially if you're chasing after some of those Visa cards and the amazing benefits that they offer. Believe us, amazing benefits. If you're interested in that, you can sign up using our link in the description below. You'll get $25 loaded onto that Visa card, that CRO Visa card, for free using our exclusive code. It is simply AB. And a couple more quick updates here as we wrap up for the day. Input Output HK at Input Output HK on Twitter. ICYMI adding Metamask to transactions prepares Cardano to become part of the DeFi revolution. So Cardano meets Metamask, something that people have really, I suppose, been patiently waiting for a while now. You guys can read more about this here on iohk.io, bringing new value and utility to the Cardano blockchain. Adding Metamask transactions prepares Cardano to become part of the DeFi revolution. Maybe you've already heard about this news. It is from the 28th of October, but if not, we'll link to this in the description below. It is a big development. Polkadot is also in the news. At Polkadot News is the Twitter handle that you can follow. 7 projects are in the new 8th wave of Web3 Foundation grant program, and they build governance operating systems, Dart scale codec, open insurance platform, cross-chain platform for the data economy, decentralized world, there you go, pretty vague, but a little bit ambitious, decentralized world. I like that. Snapshot website for Polkadot. So quite a bit happening there, and we do recommend you follow Polkadot News if, in case it's a handle that you're not familiar with, you can stay abreast with everything that they're up to. Finally, for today, guys, we are talking about Yearn Founder's latest decentralized finance project and how it's performed really very well over the last few days here. It's called Keep3r Network. It's a project launched by Yearn Finance's Cronje. It's seen gains of over 1,000% before correcting once more, with volatile price action ongoing. Let's take a look at Keep3r here. So this is really all the history that we have to share. I have a 30-day chart here selected, but as you can see, this was launched on the 28th of October at just under $28. I mean, it shot up in really the course of a day over 10 times, so over tenfold to $366. It's certainly come back down a little bit, but not all that much, all things considered. Right now, let's do a fresh update. You can see the latest price is $208.66. Down a little bit today with the rest of the market, but nonetheless a stratospheric launch and a very successful one. So Keep3r Network, I shouldn't say Keep3r, Keep3r Network. I just see the 3 there. You guys need to be patient with my aging brain. So Keep3r Network is a decentralized jobs board where developer teams can find keepers or external freelancers required to complete a task. Cronje, the founder of Yearn Finance, launched the project this week on GitHub. Keep3r's L3PR token saw 25 times gains in less than a day after the launch last week, and the price has seen another major uptick. Guys, for everything you would like to know and for everything you need to know about Keep3r Network and of course Cronje, we'll divert you over to our good friend Box Mining here. Boxmining.com is the website for this comprehensive overview of Keep3r, what it's all about, its background, where it's going, a little bit about the owner as well, and what the functionality and the utility of the project means. We'll link to this gladly and proudly in the description below. That's about it for today, everybody. Hey, do be sure you're following us on all the regular social media channels, the Facebooks, the Twitter, the Instagrams, all that stuff, and keep checking back into altcoinbuzz.io for all the latest. Go ahead, like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell to receive notifications. If you guys enjoyed today's video, best of luck if you choose to invest on this Monday. Don't forget to let me know below in the comments, who do you think is going to be better in terms of Bitcoin's price over the next few weeks and the next handful of months, maybe going into the new year? President Trump or President Biden? Who will win the election in such a way that it's going to be better for the Bitcoin ecosystem? I'm very curious to know your answers on the subject, guys. Either way, whatever your opinion may be, stay safe out there, and we do hope to see you again soon in our next video. Take care.